Hey, everybody. Welcome to
Hey.
another episode of Valiant Live, the only place, the most exclusive place. Did I say the only place?
On the
You did?
place.
For
Yeah.
everything Valianty.
The most valiant all the time.
It's the
Exactly.
Valiantiest. It's amazing. All right, everyone, before we get started, hey, I'm Matt. I'm here with Megan and George, and
Hey.
we work at Valiant Technology, a managed IT services provider located in New York City with a nationwide reach. We specialize in infrastructure, cybersecurity, compliance, and some other really important areas for small businesses when it comes to protection and growth. If you'd like to learn a little bit more about us before we actually start talking, you could always check us out at thevaliantway.com or visit us on YouTube, where we've got quite frankly, an impressive library of stuff coming together.
Yeah,
I mean, it's
absolutely.
really, it's a lot. We've got a lot going on.
A lot of
Yeah.
information on that thing. We put a lot. You'll learn quite a bit, I think, about just the
Well,
day-to-day operations and that sort of thing.
when you've
Yeah.
got a whole company that's passionate about technology and making things better through its proper usage, that's what happens.
Mhm.
And before we get started today, let's just take 2 minutes to talk about the space launch that happened yesterday. That was
Really
something.
exciting stuff.
I mean,
Yeah.
was it us?
To first civilians in space, all civilian mission.
Yeah, and it's interesting. You know, I mean, I've been reading more about it this morning. I knew it was happening. I didn't pay that much attention to it, but you know, there are 4 civilians up in space right now, and the distance that they are is actually further from us than the Hubble telescope. And I mean,
Right.
Oh wow.
it's not like, taking a trip to like your uncle's house for lunch or something like that.
Right.
They are out there. And just before we got started
It's so
this morning,
scary.
I was looking at an article, and it was all about them bringing up zip ties and sedatives. And I'm just thinking to myself, like, whoa, yeah, of course, you're 4 civilians strapped into a rocket with no one actually in there being like, don't worry, guys, I've got the wheel. It's all automated. And
Right.
Yeah.
think about the anxiety that would go through your mind as you feel like the rocket's beginning to thrust, and thinking like, oh man, I'm in here with like an accountant,
IT guy,
drywall, and yeah, so
truck
yeah,
driver. Yeah.
yeah, I could understand the need for restraints, and I think that's actually
Yeah.
a very smart thing to do. And I'm just bringing it up randomly because I literally read it like just before we
No,
started getting ready for today. But that's
Yeah.
something.
Not that anyone asked me, but I remember being like 6 and be like, no, I never want to go to space, and I still feel the same way.
No,
I'm like,
Well, you
nope.
know what? I thankfully, as much as
But it's cool. It is.
it
cool.
is. As much as
Yeah.
I love learning new things about space and exploration, and quite frankly, the larger scale of our environment as
Yeah.
people. Today we're going to talk about something that's a little bit more local, getting back to the
Yes.
office.
Correct.
Mhm.
Yeah. Your commute's not quite as long as 300 plus miles above
Yeah,
the Earth, but
I used to complain about the hour and change it would take, but look, I'm still using hours and not light years to communicate that time. So
Yeah, it's
Exactly.
all relative. It's just all relative. Yeah.
I see what you did there.
Speaking of observing what's going on and what's relative to our lives and everything else going on, let's start talking. Let's get right into it today. I think that all of us have been in the office at different frequencies
Mhm.
over the past 18 months. I was in last Tuesday, and it's nice. It's nice to come in and sit down and sit across the room from George and have a discussion instead of it being on video. And that's something I hope that we get to do more. But today let's talk a little bit about what we're seeing and what we're
Sure.
doing with regards to working from places. Starting with, what are we seeing? What are we observing? Especially with our customers that we help and that we
Exactly.
support.
Simply put, it's not conclusive, really.
Yeah.
I think a lot of folks had a pretty early. If you asked people in July what their plans were, they had a pretty solid idea. Like, hey, we're back in the office, back to school, locking it in. We know a number of our clients built new spaces, and they invested tons of resources and money and energy into building new offices, new spaces that are both COVID friendly, and to kind of foster that like next level of collaboration in person. Just kind of like, hey, when we are together, we should really make this time really valuable and kind of cherish it, which I found to be. I'll talk about that a little bit about what we're doing, but I think the time you spend with someone in person is really valuable and powerful, and you should maximize it versus, and not to say you shouldn't use the small talk period. The small talk is how you get to know each other and
it's the on ramp.
It's the on ramp, but you should, that live time together is really important. So I think a lot of what we're seeing is kind of like back to a little bit of the uncertainty of what people are doing.
Yeah, there's a bit of hurry, and because mostly I talk to mostly just prospects and people we're onboarding, so it's a little more like we're getting to know where these people are at in the pandemic, and it's more just like a hurry up and wait kind of thing. With, like George, you were saying earlier, it's week to week. We get different information about the variants and about guidelines and what's healthiest and comfort levels of employees that you have to, after a year of a pandemic.
I think unfortunately that uncertainty is definitely wearing people's
absolutely
their ardor or their excitement for work, or because now you have man, we're back to school. If you have kids, or even if you don't have kids now, you have school buses and stuff to do, and it's busier. It's September is always a change, I think. If you kind of go to the cycle of life here in States, and I just think that people are and the companies are just so uncertain, and I think that's wearing down people's excitement or their giving, because early in the pandemic people work from home, so they're overworking or they're doing so many hours of work, kind of locked into their desk at home, and then now we're okay. Now there's kind of at least we have a relief inside, or we're changing things. We're going to go back to an office or hybrid, whatever it may be. And now we're back to kind of not knowing what's going to happen.
Well, go on, Matt. Sorry.
I was speaking of not knowing. I know, George, you had a survey sent out to our customers earlier in the week to kind of get a sense of what their intentions are. And while we're in regular communication with them, it's nice to have the survey because it gives us a centralized place to start looking at it.
Some hard data points as well.
And
exactly.
I've got it up, and let's just, we had a question. When do you anticipate staff returning to your office? Now, all this is anonymized. There's nothing here that's going to be inappropriate here, but, we plan to open our new space at the end of September. Fingers crossed. There is a certain degree of doubt. We're on a hybrid schedule with everyone spending 2 days in the office. So there are definitely companies that are bringing people in. Here's another one. We've already been trickling back. More people will start on projects in the coming weeks with a schedule mixture of full remote, hybrid, and full-time in the office. So I think it's a little bit of everything. It's a little column A, it's a little column B, and it's whatever works best for your business. And also make sure that your employees are comfortable with whatever decisions are being made.
They have to feel safe. I mean, I think, and for us, I know a lot of our staff, myself included, we go on site to different companies. We tend to be more mobile than I think a lot of folks would be. It's the nature of our work. We still have to support a lot of companies that have tons of infrastructure on site. At the end of the day, not everything is in the cloud, and not everything will be in the cloud. I mean, it's just based on your applications, your workloads, company culture. There's so many different factors that go into that. So,
let me ask you then: what have we seen with regards to companies that have significant in-house resources they can't necessarily use remotely?
A lot of improvisation. In terms, especially around our clients that are doing video production or heavy duty studio production, they've actually, a lot of them have gone back, or at least in a very hybrid mode when they have certain workloads to do or certain job functions. But they found their workarounds. I mean, there's a lot of great companies out there, new young companies, new young technology that is solving the problem. And unfortunately, necessity is the mother of invention. So people are finding a way to deliver product or delivering their services, regardless of physicality. We see it a lot. That was my big takeaway is that, just my own personal takeaway is that physical things should be saved for physical need, if that makes sense. You shouldn't waste, if someone can work remotely and get a great job done, but when you do see them, you should maximize that time on site. Let's say we're doing a rollout of equipment. You want to kind of stack it so that everything's prepared and you're actually using that time not just to roll out equipment, but to interact with the people there. And get more connection.
Yeah, look, it's going to be a bit of a silly comparison, but I think that you guys will agree, or at least George, I know you will, because this is going to hit the heartstrings a little bit. You're not one to eat fast food that often, right?
No, I try not to.
But
I love it.
Someone mentions Black Iron Burger, what happens?
Oh, everyone gets excited in the office. Or Mexico.
Yeah, but it's also because we don't do it that often.
Correct.
It's not an everyday
Right.
thing.
Yeah.
And you
Yeah.
take that moment and you realize how special it is. And yeah, I'm talking about a burger, whatever, but you savor it. You enjoy
or
it.
Mexican. Or
It's a
I'll
treat.
talk about Mexican barbecue, which we'll
Okay.
get to in a second.
Okay.
So it's delicious.
But
Yeah.
I think it's kind of similar to that. It's
Mhm.
you take that time, you realize it's something special, and yeah, it might be the workplace, but if you're sitting down with your team, you make sure that you realize in some ways you're lucky that you have the ability to do that.
Correct.
Well, that's like a good segue, I think, into what Valiant is doing. Like,
Right.
I mean, George, tomorrow we're having a back to school event.
That's right.
For ourselves.
We're having our company, pre-pandemic had a pretty strong culture of, post work or outside of work friendships and collaboration and hanging out and chatting.
Let's take 2 seconds to talk about it. We used to have a monthly staff meeting where everyone would come into the office, and what was the best? Thank you.
Bagels. We had good bagels. We tried different bagel places. We're in New York, so bagels are easy to find, but really great bagels are a challenge as always.
Well, and we had to get
Montreal
there
style.
early.
Yes.
So
yes.
it was a good sweetener to that deal. I was like,
exactly.
all right, breakfast
Exactly.
here.
And
Absolutely.
then obviously we had like a lounge where we had certain adult beverages, very prevalent, and we spent a lot of time doing that. And obviously the pandemic kind of changed that. So we're really excited to have folks back in the office to have a kind of a mixer, if you want to call it that, or back to school party. But one of the things we mandated is that everyone be vaccinated before they come back in person. We thought it was really important for everyone's safety, and the fact that we go on site to so many different customers. I mean, I would hope that if they ask a question, we can say, "Hey, we validated this to make sure that people were safe and they're following the best protocols." And we made some changes to our physical space to prepare for going out in the field and to be back in the office. It is optimal if we're working, if people feel safe and secure and they come in and they're not worried about. So I know I got a lot of good feedback from our staff saying, "Hey, I'm really glad you did that. I'm really glad you made that choice." And even though it was not mandated by law or that, we just thought it was really important. So
I mean, and speaking as employee, I know it gave me peace of mind as well. Just like when honestly, the restaurants having the proof of vaccine, I know that is still an imperfect system, but that made me feel that much safer. And again, like you were saying, we have to go on site. We have to visit these clients. So we have to maybe practice the safest.
At the end of the day, a large part of what we do is identify and mitigate technology risks. And I don't see why that wouldn't also extend into the physical world. I think that's a part of customer service. You don't want to bring risks into your customer spaces.
Correct.
And I think it's a fantastic safety measure. I was in the office on Tuesday, and it was comfortable. The only thing that I personally I dread is the commute. Some of the is getting
the railroad. Yeah, me too.
Like you get home and you just want to burn your clothing and take an iodine bath.
Wow, that burns.
Take that, Long Island Railroad.
Well,
it is a problem, but the office is a different situation. You get in there and it's comfortable. You sit down and you get some work done, and you leave feeling like you've accomplished something at the end of the day. And that's I think what we want for everybody.
And I think the long tail is that we're gonna, I think this proving in the past year and a half, we're gonna have a lot of hybrid remote work. Some some days, some weeks you can be heavy on remote work because you're doing either really quiet work or it's just the nature of the work that has to get done. Other times it's going to be very heavy on-site work. I know if we're doing office relocations or build outs or onboardings. I mean, you can't onboard. I mean, you can onboard a lot of the customer remotely. At some point, there's a physical touch that makes it better.
We're not in that avatar place just yet, folks.
Not yet. Soon. So I mean, it depends on the company, right? It depends on if are they 100% remote company? Because we have started working with some companies that are 100% remote. Their culture was remote before the pandemic, so it was a very natural thing. It was almost no change for them. It was more a matter of like, well, now everyone else is doing what we've always known. Whereas other companies, and I think us included, we really did like that in-personness to some degree. I think once again, for everyone, I think depending on your job role, and for the most part, most people can work a hybrid remote. And I think the thing we, as a company, that we're being very thoughtful about is over communicate, or at least working on being over communicative and talking to
Yes.
people,
Yeah.
find out what's going on with them, both professionally and personally,
Mhm.
and hopefully make them feel comfortable and that they're able to accomplish their work, and they're and that it's not just another day in the salt mine kind of vibe, which is
Yeah.
hard. It's
Yeah,
hard.
absolutely. And even going back to what you said before, like in the early top of the stream, there's like just sort of people losing the ardor, sorry, ardor for the
Art,
work,
yeah,
ardor, ardor
ardor,
for the work, hodor. But yeah, it's that personal connection is a big part of
right,
feeling valued. It's so simple and it feels trivial. Like it feels trivial to say, but people feeling valued in the workspace as a person, that gives
right,
them dignity, and also it makes them excited about the job. They want to deliver.
right.
They want to be in good standing with their team and with
With their
their
team,
yeah,
I think is the operative word.
yeah.
People tend to work or be motivated not just from like getting yelled at or fear of something. It's much more about they want to solve a problem, work for their teammates.
I want to
Uh,
make our like Paul Schroeder. I always want to make his job easier for onboardings. Like
Correct.
Mhm.
that's always when I feel like I do my best work because I make sure I go through everything.
Exactly. You do a much
Absolutely.
better job than I ever do, Megan. Thank you. The
Well, you've a
attention to
lot
detail
more
is
to
higher.
worry about than me. So you're okay.
No, it's attention to detail thing. You're
Yeah.
just much better. But that's the thing. And you want to, and I think that's a really important thing. And I think the other thing that's really important is that, as that if you are going to stay hybrid or stay in this kind of mix, you should really be intentional in
Well,
every step of it.
I think at a minimum, you have to say something like you're going to commit to a fiscal year of doing something because you want to at least remove some of that uncertainty from staff members'
Right.
minds.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. They just want to know what's going on half the
Mhm.
time.
And
Absolutely.
I think if they have other outside work responsibilities, like everyone does, but like let's say you have kids, a parent, family members you're taking care of, or part of your,
Mhm.
your
Mhm.
household existence, that sort of thing causes a lot of stress for someone. So and you're right, we want to commit to a certain amount of period so they know, hey, this is the deal, is what we're looking for, and not so random. And of course, I mean, in our line of work, it's always going to be random because things break
Hmm.
in exciting and new, unusual ways.
Hmm.
But that being said, the better we plan for those things breaking, the better outcome we'll have for both ourselves and the customer. And
So,
that kind of,
so,
yeah,
so I feel like what you're getting at is table topping a little bit, really.
I listen. The more you go through the possibilities of what can go wrong,
Mhm.
the
Mhm.
better outcome you'll have. I mean, I think one of the first things you should, any business leader or even someone responsible for delivering a product or service, is say, hey, what are the pieces that are required for me to do this thing, and really start digging down to it. And I think that being remote doesn't change that. It just
Mhm.
makes it more. It actually just makes it more complicated because now you might deliver that service in
Well,
two
okay. So
ways.
there's a couple of extra settings in the configuration you have to come up with
Correct.
for it. And look, if anyone here is wondering what a tabletop is, we do have an episode of our
Yep.
stream dedicated to tabletop exercises, which is a personal favorite of mine because we did
Yep.
have kind of like an emergency right in the middle of it, and
Yes,
you
that
you
was
guys
fun.
you guys took over and it was perfect. So it was beautiful.
Yes, it
So
was. It was.
anything around contingency planning or
Uh,
really addressing the what ifs, that is an excellent episode to just
yes,
kind of watch.
Hmm.
it's really useful. It's probably one of the most useful things you'll do as a small medium business is to
Hmm.
play
Hmm.
is just take a little bit of time, play the what if game, and for the negative. Also, I mean, you can look for the positive as well. That's a great way. It's a good way to like kind of say, hey, well, these are opportunities out there and explore things. But um, for technology, infrastructure, and cybersecurity, go for the
Yeah.
bad stuff.
Well,
So-
and it's a necessity right now. Like
right.
we were talking before, the increase of cyber attacks has gone. I can't find the exact. I read somewhere that was like 400%, which I think is attempts. Just like everyone's online, everyone's
Hmm.
remote,
Hmm.
so there's so many
Correct.
more chances. But then I found some other numbers that was like speaking to the tabletop stuff, 79% of small businesses were hurt by their lack of cyber crime preparedness. And
Correct.
that kind of, it, you know, it, it's that we've said this a lot. It's not if, but when.
Right.
And it's just so much better to have a contingency plan, because how you recover from it is going to be like 80% of if you are still a business after a cyber attack.
I guess I think that there are three very important things as people we all need to remember: eat your vegetables, brush your teeth, and it's not if but when. Those are like, if you can figure those three out, you'll make it through pretty.
That's
pretty
a good,
decently.
yeah, that's good. But practically speaking, there's a lot of things you can do that would make that, and especially with this hybrid. And I think the other thing that's really important, and just to kind of touch back on it, is that think about the things that your team needs to accomplish their work, and work and find out what's missing. Like talk to the different people on different levels in your company. Kind of
walk backwards.
Walk backwards from the. And a lot of times, policies and processes you might have had in place pre-pandemic, which you still assume are working properly, are probably not, because there's always like the interstitial space in any relationship or any kind of process where maybe that process relies on someone sitting next to the person and turning their head and go, hey, how does that work? I don't get it. Or can you show me this? And that may happen more often than you realize as an executive or business leader, or even as just getting your work done. You may do it unconsciously, because I know myself, and sometimes when I work with Matt or I work with Nick or our service director or anyone in the company, we start laying out processes into flow charts or trying to understand it better. And then you start saying there's almost these kind of like unknown boxes of things that have like 40 steps in it, that in your head you're like, do this, but if you broke those down, they're so complex. And I think that's one of the things we're returning back to the office, is that those pieces of these like unwritten, undocumented processes cause a lot of stress for folks, because now they found workarounds. But is that workaround the way they're supposed to do it now in the future? Now they're back in the office, or hybrid.
Secure. Yeah.
Right. Is it secure? Right.
So,
is it?
So hey, we just to change gears for 1 second, we did get an incoming comment, and I'm assuming that 2 out of 3 means brushing teeth and eating vegetables.
Yes. Yes.
We'll have to. I'm going to follow up on this and figure it.
That's a good one. I think that's an important one.
Okay, let's get back to considerations for small businesses. I think that's where this episode is really going to bring something that's of real importance. I think having observances of what's been going on is one thing, but really getting into what you can do moving forward is important. And confirmed, brushing teeth and eating vegetables. So
boy.
Critical.
But I think let's you touched upon cybersecurity and compliance a couple of moments ago, and I think that's something that we should talk about a bit. Everyone has been from at home. I recently got I've got my computer here that I use for work. That's a Valiant owned machine, and I just got a Valiant owned laptop recently. I want to make sure that everything that we work with is secure and stable and enables us to do our jobs just like what we do for our customers. And prior to that, I had a MacBook Air. That's an old machine of mine that I wiped and only used for work. So, I mean, realistically, for all intents and purposes, it was configured as a Valiant machine. But that's not going to be the typical situation for someone who had to go work from home for the past year and a half and use their cell phone or use their home PC or whatever it is that they're using. And especially in situations where they're dealing with mobile devices, laptops that maybe their kids play Warcraft or whatever the hotness is these days. I don't play video games anymore, so I'm sorry if that was dated. But those machines come back in an office. What if you got a little something crawling on them that you're not aware of? Those present significant risks.
Correct. I think, especially if multiple people are using the machine for multiple different purposes. I mean, how many times in my own family where they're talking about, hey, can I download this insert thing? And I'm like, well, no. Because it's of unknown provenance, and also if it's free, you're the product, right? So multiply that across an entire fleet of equipment that is connecting to corporate resources, and we're seeing that actually when we're doing some compliance work with our customers, where a lot of the larger companies are mandating very strict remote access because they're seeing the cyber attack growing. So I think that one of the considerations is to really think about how your staff is going to permanently work in a hybrid workplace. Truly step back for a second and be like, and and I know Meg and I spoke to someone the other day, and they're migrating from desktops to laptops
Right.
because
Yeah.
they recognize that
It
they
needs
have
to be mobile. Yeah.
mobile. They don't know where their folks are going to be working from. They and this is, and I just think it's an acceleration of something that's been happening for years, but it really put the kind of this made it happen 5 years sooner than it was going to happen to begin with, right? So
And
it's
I'll say, yeah, absolutely, George. And I'll say something a little drier as well. Like all of those considerations, like making your workforce better at moving from home to the office. There's also just like I think we had a client who called us and they're like, oh yeah, like half of our office is back and nothing's working. Talk to your IT provider about, because it's not just like a shoe you can put on again. Things have changed. The environment needs to be updated.
Infrastructure is not a dump truck.
Yes.
You can't just pull a lever and things work.
And I think that's a huge thing I learned working here. I was like, oh, this takes a lot of maintenance.
There's a lot of that's a great point. And there's a lot of little things, and once again, if you think about when things were originally deployed or designed, they were designed to be in an in-office environment, and then for obviously for the last 18 months, we've kind of like made our ersatz, cobbled together workarounds and workflows, and some folks were really prepared for it. We had clients that like, honestly, I don't even need to miss a beat. They literally just work from home.
Right.
They had laptops, mobile devices, and multi-factor already set up. They're great at identity management. Everything was like in place. That wasn't the norm. That was the exception.
Right.
And I think that any future planning has to be around what you're saying, which is, hey, this has to be 1,000% mobile, 1,000% hybrid, fully thought out, reimagined, always available. And that obviously next week we have a really exciting episode about the cloud. But we'll get to that. But honestly, with a combination of a lot of the mobility, a lot of remote management in the cloud, you can really do this for most, especially if you have a service business or a business doing creative work. Now, if you're doing retail or hospitality, that's not necessarily the case because it's definitely a physical thing.
Yes.
Right. And I think that those operations need to be more cognizant of the security and the fact that they may have staff a lot of new staff. That's the other thing I think training, because I think a lot of folks are changing their roles. I think there's a lot of people. There's like kind of like this.
There's a shift in career trajectory, not just roles. It's people going from one thing to something that's completely different.
Right. I mean, we're seeing it. Just in our people like, hey, where'd you come before this? And they can't see from a totally different environment. They may not come from insert whatever business it is. So there's a lot of movement, and that lot of movement causes not only opportunity, but it also can cause some serious downsides of issues around security, particularly, especially if someone doesn't have the training or mind frame of working in a secured infrastructure IT environment, right? If you're moving from one to another. So I think there's a ton of considerations here for some of us. And I think the other big thing is, just to kind of almost wrap it up, like find out what people want. And then talk to your, and then talk to your IT provider, and talk to your figure out the pieces that may or may not work well. Like what worked in the last 18 months. Like ask the question, and ask the question of your staff, and ask the question of yourself, and ask the question of your vendors and partners. Be like, hey, what worked well? What didn't work well?
Yeah.
What can be better? What didn't work?
Oh, and the part where you say talking with your vendors and partners is incredibly critical right now, especially when it comes to technology, because there are shortages left and right.
Correct. Of equipment and staff and systems.
Yeah.
I mean, I know for some of our key vendors that we work with, we're looking at like a 60 to 90 day lead time on equipment.
We have to be very upfront about that. With our prospects, we're trying to tell them the lay of the land right now.
Right.
Just technologically.
Exactly. And unfortunately we've been spending years with this kind of like just in time kind of delivery model, and it just doesn't fly, or it just doesn't operate well in this kind of environment.
Yeah.
And I think we've got to be, and once again, this is where that tabletopping, that planning, that review process, where you can, try to understand what's happening in your own business and work with your vendors and partners, it can really give you that leg up. because if you're ready to, if you already have an idea of what's going to happen 3 months from now, 6 months from now, and take away and control the variables you can control,
Yeah.
then you're going to have an advantage.
You can stay on the course that you intend.
Right.
And I think that's, at the end of the day, the most important thing is communicate, set your goals, and make sure that you stay on track.
Exactly.
All right, let's talk a little bit about next week before we call it a day. I want us to keep this nice and short.
Yes.
We just hit over the 30-minute mark, so we're getting better. The past few weeks have been a little bit much.
This
is
felt
better.
great. Yeah. This felt
exactly.
Next week we're going to be talking about the cloud is just someone else's data center. I don't know why I was compelled to use the air quotes there, because it's kind of true.
I think people think it's the
I think it's also a little tongue in cheek the way we put it, because it's sort of like you hear it so much, the cloud. It's like, yeah, but you know what? There's still machines and they're still someplace. It's not like this mystical otherworldly dimension where all the equipment is, and there's data being passed back and forth through like a wormhole.
Right.
Maybe that was a
a bit dramatic.
That's what I've been telling prospects. Is that not true?
Wormholes. No wormholes.
It's a wormhole. Yeah. Sorry.
Worm drive. Anyway,
Rosenstein, Eisenberg, was it? I'm just going to completely mess up every single physicist's name, even though they're super common. So we're just going to say that this is really going to be talking about, taking a little bit of the mystery out of the cloud. How does it function? What does it mean? Is there one big cloud? Are there little clouds? Are they nimbocumulus? Or what? Are there fish in the sky up above?
Cumulostratus.
You see the streaks in the sky, and the sky is pink. You're like, oh, I got to take care of my backups. No, it doesn't really work like that.
Yeah, I think that as a fan of someone who always does try to understand how everything works, we just don't want people to get into that Arthur C. Clarke percent of when you're far enough removed from technology, it becomes magic.
Yes.
And there's nothing magical about it. I mean, it's magical that it all works as well as it does. Personally, as someone who's been just observing it for a long time, and part of it, but it's actually really interesting when you start breaking it down. But it's just and the biggest piece of it, I think, and we'll get into this next week, is scale. And that's the part we should talk about, and that's what we're going to explain. So
we're going to do that, and I think it'll be fun to talk a little bit about some of the common components inside of a data center. Like I was once I talked to a friend about the hot and cold aisles, and again that was a magic moment. Why is one aisle hot and the one next to it cold? It's like because that's where all the hot air is going when they leave the machines.
Correct. And
that's literally
very simple. Yeah.
And is it a top of rack environment or is it an end of cabinet environment? And we can go, and not that we want to get into a nerd out on data centers,
but just give a sense of how the complexities and why they exist in the way that they do, without having to delve into the nuts and bolts. We don't need nuts and bolts here. It's in the cloud. There are no nuts and bolts in the cloud. Come on.
Yeah, it falls out of the cloud.
Yeah.
And I'll say, as someone who joined from retail and like kind of got educated about IT on the job, which was so amazing. It's once moving from the like technology as magic space to like understanding how it works is just so powerful for the end user. Really, I'm really excited about next week's stream.
It helps you understand why things don't work.
Yeah,
and then then conversely, it really does help you understand like when it does work that. These are the pieces that you have to like be thoughtful and protect and really understand, and it's a lot to it. So I'm really excited about that stream next week, and we'll give it. I think we'll make it a real good explanation of something that, once again, appears magic on the surface, but it really isn't magic at all.
No. Nope.
We're not going to saw anyone in half, but it's going to be very entertaining. I promise you.
Yes. It's just a sleight of hand.
And on that note, you guys have a good one. Thank you to everyone that watched. If you want to know more about us, please do visit us at thevaliantway.com. Right, boom, there's the address right there. And until next week, everyone have a good one.